the rates got Joe,
There you
what's
go.
up? Back again.
What's going on, T? Back
Oh,
again like a bad rash. Doesn't go away.
like a bad rash. The No Name Podcast returns. Well, I have a lot to tell you, and so instead of telling you before we hit record, I'm going to tell you what happened in the past week. But I want you to start
Yeah,
first because rates got cut
yeah,
yesterday, September 18th, as we're recording this,
yep.
and the market is ripping higher. What's coming next? Take a minute and walk people through what you see. We expected this, so how's it? Right, here we are, like another rung down the ladder, closer to hell. What's it look like to you, and what are you hearing and seeing through your network?
Yeah, I've got a nuanced perspective, and I haven't zeroed in. I think there's a couple possibilities, but number
Nuance is
one, I
good.
just want to start with you probably saw this too, but the Pocahontas, what's her name? Elizabeth Warren
Yes,
wrote a letter saying the Fed needs to cut interest rates 75%, or sorry, 75 basis points, which is
yes,
0.75%.
yep.
And it went on and on about how this is a responsible thing to do. And thank you for your attention to this matter. So I saw that letter and I was like, gosh, it's not going to happen. But I hope that instead of cutting interest rates, they come out and raise rates 75 basis points
Wouldn't that have been a ball
just
buster?
to send a message. They didn't
Yeah.
do that. They cut 50 basis points. So
No, they're
there's
they're pansies. Yep.
two takes here. The markets are ripping today. The immediate market response yesterday, it actually wasn't enthused. It wasn't an immediate bump. So, I think you can read it one of two ways. And a lot of it depends upon what's coming next in terms of US political situation, whether it's going to be business as usual or an acceleration of the current trends,
Oh,
or, there is a counter revolution that is
yes.
seemingly trying to pump the brakes. So 50 basis point cut, it means one of two things. The first thing is the Fed is, trying to kind of ease into the presidential election. And it's a take that some have, like they're obviously trying to support the current administration. The other take is it's an admitting that the economy is not nearly as robust as the government statistics suggest they are. Um,
You think?
and I believe that to be the case. I mean, I think we see that as the case, that the economy is not nearly as robust as the statistics say they are, because they've touted job growth and all these other things. But um, so I think it's really, to me, looking at it, what's coming next in terms of fiscal policies? Is there actually going to be any type of resistance to continuing spending $2 trillion a year in excess of tax
Extra.
revenue, which is
Yes.
already $4 trillion too many,
Right.
too much in terms of the tax revenue. Um, so I'm just looking, man. Because to me, it's interest rates are not really the driver. What's the driver is federal spending. It's government spending. If they do not cut government spending, it not interest rates don't matter. They could kick the can a little bit longer, but the end result is the same. The only thing that matters is, are we going to stop the runaway train in Washington or not? That's it. And then
No
interest rates,
chance.
just how long can this train go before it crashes? So that's my
Yeah.
thought.
So a couple questions, couple follow-ons for that. Lynn Alden, the great Lynn Alden, who really is just a wonderful teacher, and she's done such a good job, talks about this as fiscal dominance, right? If the government's going to spend that much extra money, it's almost like obviously at some point they have to be constrained, right? Like at some point, 40 trillion, 50 trillion, $100 trillion in debt. At some point, any amount of interest completely sucks away all the tax revenues and you just don't
Yeah,
have any money left. How
yeah,
close are we to what economists call, or what guys like you call, a debt spiral, where you're actually printing money to pay for the interest on the money you've already printed, right? Because that's
yeah.
the
We're
end.
rapidly getting close because we're at $1 trillion to federal interest, like interest on the government debt, 1 trillion this year. First time in history, 1 trillion.
Yeah.
Now that's not quite. we're not quite to that spiral level. They could, I mean, if they were willing to cut spending, they could still avoid it
Hmm.
because it's, if you look at the tax revenues compared to what they call, what do they call it? Mandatory spending. I disagree with this, but they
Yep.
call it mandatory spending, which is Social Security, Medicare, and to a certain extent,
They
they call it defense spending. To me, it
they
looks
call
like offense.
right.
But,
They call it
uh,
mandatory spending so that you can't disagree with it. Yeah, exactly.
right, right.
Right. And so
Um,
it's like, so what is like, how is somebody supposed to think about this? What is GDP if the government doesn't spend an extra $2 trillion that they don't have?
GDP's down because
Obviously,
GDP
right?
incorporates government spending.
Right. It's
So
like so the entire game is rigged. The whole thing is fixed, and the dashboard of numbers that these so-called experts are willing to show you and then tout as growth or strong economy or whatever else, every single one of them is cooked. Like the entire book is fucked, really. Outrageous.
and that is one read of the 50 basis point 0.5% interest rate cut. Yeah, that's one read that we saw the rosy economic statistics that the government agencies put out. Well, if the economy is so strong, why is the Fed cutting 0.5%?
Well,
So one take is that this is admitting in a roundabout way that, yeah, sorry, those things are not as important. Now, there was one thing stood out to me about Fed Chair Jerome Powell's press conference, just trying to make sense of it. What's, where is the Fed? Where are they going? One comment, one question that he received, I think the only valid question, only important question. One of the reporters asked, what does this mean for quantitative tightening? And quantitative tightening is the Fed allowing US Treasury bonds to mature without buying new bonds. So basically allowing debt to roll off its balance sheet. That's kind of jargon, but meaning not printing new money to buy Treasury bonds
to keep
in
the whole game
excess.
going. Yes, yes.
Yes. And he
Allowing
said it doesn't mean
shrinkage.
anything. Yeah, he said it means nothing for it, which would suggest that they will allow the Treasury debt to continue to roll off the balance sheet, which still tightens and puts pressure on the U.S. Treasury to cut spending. And so I'm trying to figure out, is the Fed, do they recognize what we are talking about? And that is, if government spending continues without restraint, it's going to blow up everything, including the system that they derive wealth, power, and status from. They do have an incentive to maintain their current system because it empowers them.
Yes.
And so, I have thought for the last probably year and a half or so that the Fed has recognized that they have to enact some form of restraint. I believe that was part of the most aggressive interest rate hiking campaign in history, was to implement some form of restraint, not as much as we would like, but something. And but is that actually the case? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to find out by their actions really over the next 6 months, because what happens, I think, over the next 6 months is probably going to bake the cake in terms of what's the next 10 years going to look like.
Yeah, we're gonna find out the answer to a lot of very perplexing
Yeah.
questions and situations, and I want to bring some of those up here. But as another quick follow-on before we move on, is Powell a fan of Trump? Is he a Trump guy, or is he a never Trump guy? I know there's an illusion and a kind of myth, right, that the central bankers are somehow neutral and apolitical, but of course that's not true. Only
Right.
a real
That's not true.
naive would believe that. But um, where does Powell fall in terms of Trump, who survived another assassination attempt apparently
Yes.
this week
Another
too?
one.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure
Here's
that I believe what's going on. I mean, it seems
right.
like it's being
Right.
ginned up as tremendous theater at this point. And if the
Yeah.
and if this guy really is, if people really are trying to kill him, like, isn't something going to be done about this? No, and nothing's going to be
Yeah.
done about it. It's
Yeah.
just going to
And
continue
that's
until.
that's interesting. I'll answer your question, but just to leave it hanging. We don't know for sure if we can believe these things, but I don't think. Well, I mean, what's the incentive behind these types of stories? And that's something to think about. What's the incentive for people to believe that there are attempts on Trump's life if it's not true? And I don't, I
It's
don't know.
too much. It's
Right
too
now it
much for
looks
me
like,
to sort out.
yeah,
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 exactly.
it
I don't
is.
I
It
don't
is.
know that it's true anymore. I don't know that we're not
And
looking
I
at
don't know
some
that it's not
grand.
true either. It's just kind
Exactly.
of,
Could be true.
you know,
Could be true.
where
If it
everything's
is,
moving so
yeah,
fast.
if it is, I
Um,
mean, it speaks so loudly about how, right? Like it speaks
yeah,
so loudly about how absolutely dysfunctional the country has become and corrupt and all the rest. Like obviously there's no incentive for the state to provide cover for the leading candidate to unseat them out of their cushy positions of power. I mean, that only makes sense, but the fact that it's gone this far, I mean, I just got back from overseas, as you know. I'm going to tell you my story here in just a bit, but
yeah.
please finish that thought. Like, where does Powell fall on the like how is he
Okay.
influenced by what possible political scenarios and outcomes coming up?
Yeah. So here's, I mean, what Jerome Powell's a Wall Street guy. Okay. He is from what he made $100 million as a private equity guy on Wall Street. Okay. He is fundamentally different from the last two Fed chairmen, which were Janet Yellen, who's now the US Treasury Secretary under the Biden administration. That tells you something about her political beliefs. Ben Bernanke before that, from my everything I've read and everything I understand, Ben Bernanke was just kind of an empty suit academic. Worked his entire life in academia, same as Janet Yellen, by the way. Both worked in academia, never held a productive job, and it we could we could make an argument that working on Wall Street isn't a productive job either, but it is a job where you have direct exposure to the consequences of your decisions and your actions. So, in that respect, it is in the private economy. But anyway, fundamentally different from Janet Yellen and Ben Bernanke in that Powell does not come from academia. He was on Wall Street. I believe he's tied into the major power structure within the New York banking cartel. And so if you look at Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan, who I would argue, one could make an argument that he's kind of the leading figure within the New York banking scene. He has, I don't know that he's directly endorsed Donald Trump, but he has indirectly endorsed Donald Trump. He refused to endorse Kamala Harris. And speaking of Trump, he said, well, the guy was pretty much right on a lot of stuff. And he started rattling off some things that he thought Trump was correct about.
He very
Um,
apologetically pointed out that Trump actually has
yes,
a business brain
yes,
and isn't completely stupid in spite of all the dumb things that
exactly,
comes out of his mouth. Like the guy does understand
exactly.
how to make money. Yeah.
And Diamond has always voted Democrat. I
Hmm.
believe he's a card carrying Democrat, registered as Democratic voters. So that is significant that he's not endorsing Harris and he's saying these nice things about Trump. And then Trump came out and announced that he had a conversation with Diamond and that Diamond would be like the leading candidate for leading for Treasury Secretary of the U.S.,
Yeah.
replacing Janet Yellen. And so, if I'm correct that Powell is kind of in league with the New York banking interest, it does look like they have kind of rallied. And I don't even want to use that term. I don't know that it's they are behind Trump. I think it might even be more to an extent that it's almost like they have some type of an agreement where they will lead Trump or help Trump
Right.
kind of navigate things a little bit in terms of try because I believe their incentive is to try to preserve the existing financial system
Of course.
in which the power is ensconced in New York.
Yep.
And speaking just you and I and our understanding of the Austrian School of Economics, we're not on their team. However, we can look at it and we can say, well, their system is better than the globalist Great Reset system that the World Economic Forum is touting that they want to produce with central bank digital currencies and you'll own nothing, be happy, and property rights are a thing of the past and all that. So we can look at it and we can say, well, the New York guys are at least better than the guys in Brussels and
Clearly.
in the European Union. But they're not what we
Yeah,
want.
we'd
But
rather
anyway,
get screwed
that's
by guys in New York than
yes.
Brussels, no
Well, it's kind
question.
of I've heard this said. If your choice is between people who absolutely hate your guts and people who just kind of don't think you're important, so they largely ignore you, I I'll choose the person who will ignore me because I want to be ignored anyway. Leave me
Yeah,
alone. Let me
exactly.
live my life.
But what a crossroads we've come to, like that's the choices
Yeah.
now, I mean
Yeah.
it's perfectly representative of what you see. Kamala Harris was essentially a whore. I mean, she was a very high class.
Yeah.
She
She
slept,
she
she slept her way into
Willie Brown, I think
politics.
was the guy's name, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The
Willie
big
Brown or
wig
yeah,
in
yeah.
California politics,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. And
When she was in her 20s and he was like
yeah,
50
she
and
was a
people would
groupie.
ask, well, is
Yeah.
this your father? And no, it's not. She was his mistress.
Yes, exactly. And so, no surprise there. She's never really done anything. She didn't do
Yeah,
anything to get to the vice presidency.
yeah.
She's sort of qualified by,
Well,
yeah,
she was a woman that wasn't explicitly white. That was
right.
her credentials.
Exactly. That's her credential. And so that's what it's come down to. And then on the other hand, when I hear people criticize Trump, it's very hard to argue that they're wrong, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
And so we're at a situation like the crossroads is you're stuck with this or you're stuck with that, but you're going to be stuck with one of them. And so,
yeah.
anyway, enough about that because God knows everybody's, everybody who votes is loathing the decision, that's coming anyway.
Right, right.
And who knows if Trump will actually be alive when November 5th rolls around or what the hell's going to happen between now and then
And
because
even if he is alive, will like I mean, will there be? I suspect I have this sinking feeling that no matter the results of what they say the results of the election are, nobody's going to accept them.
no,
This thing could get hung and like go through the inauguration, and I
I
mean,
can't see
it
how
could
it won't.
be absolute chaos.
I can't see how it won't. So we have that
Yeah,
to look forward to. That's exciting.
can't wait.
This decide
Make
where
sure
you
you're
want to
not in
be.
Northern Virginia when that's
Exactly. Decide where you want to be, right? When that shoe drops. But we have a lot more to get to because also in the last 2 days, and we'll get to this at the end, but just to introduce it, what's going on in the Middle East is obviously is it's not a tragedy because that implies that it's not intentional. But the
right.
blowing up of people's devices and however the Israelis did this, to smuggle explosive material inside these pagers or phones. Obviously, in the reporting in the West is that, oh, well, we're only killing bad terrorists and all the rest, and it's like, I mean, this is the absolute worst kind of stuff that has happened in our lifetime. It's blatant.
This is civilization going
This
backwards.
is
Is what it
civilization
is.
falling off the cliff, and there will be a breaking point. If this isn't it, I'll be surprised, but there is going to come a great big response from these people that the Israelis keep poking, in the out and out sort of stated goal of creating a regional war. They cannot win a regional war by themselves. That means the United
They
States
want the U.S. in.
has
They're
to
trying
come
to
to
get the
their
U.S.
rescue.
involved. Yeah,
And since so many people so many of the trained SEALs in our legislature already answer and sit up and bark and beg and do what they have to do to the Israeli lobby, there's no chance that the United States doesn't answer that call and get pulled into that. And so, by this time next week, it's entirely possible that the world is in a full-blown war, and that it's coming. And regardless, it's clear that the people running societal institutions are in favor of this. It's clear that this is being done from the highest level. It's being done on purpose. It's being done to create troubles. And your job, I guess, is to sort of play along and get crushed by it and lose your life
and
and right, send your kids to die and
yeah,
all the
and
rest.
at the same time, this is happening. In the Near East, they're trying to give the Ukraine government permission to shoot
Yep.
U.S. or NATO supplied long range missiles deep into Russia,
Yep.
which
Which
is
could,
another provocation of war, which Russia has clearly said, if you do this,
yep.
we will consider NATO to
We're at
be at
war.
war with Russia.
It's a
So there's two
declaration of war.
wars.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
two wars. Like
Yes.
that's what these people want. Like how insane
Yep.
can you be? Except it's not insane because it's clear that they want this to
It's deliberate.
destabilize.
Yes. And
Yes.
so making sense of all of that, because of course it doesn't make sense at all, right? But trying to make sense of that, my message to people, and then I'm going to get into my week this past week. I had a fabulous week in El Salvador. And just great,
Yeah.
great stuff. Yeah, I have a ton to share with everybody. But to try to make sense of it, understand that what you're watching is the breakdown of an old system. It's a way of thinking is coming to an end. And in order for the people who have benefited, we've all benefited from it. We've all benefited from the West being sort of a top dog and apex kind of civilization over the last 500 years or more, depending on when you draw the line. We've all benefited from it, but a good portion of what has to change for the better. The U.S. was sort of the last man standing at the last global barroom brawl. And so that couldn't last. I mean, places that were beat down and destroyed and blown up, obviously they rebuilt, right? Obviously they got themselves together, and right, they've earned their prosperity and they want a bigger seat at the table. And then the response by the West to say, well, you're not allowed to have a bigger seat at the table. So nanny nanny boo boo. Um, of course, won't fly. It just won't fly. Like it's not, you can't do that. Every time you see a hegemon that just refuses to sort of play nice or allow other people to also enjoy the prosperity that they've worked hard to earn, it's impossible, right? You can't lock down the entire world and order everybody to obey your rules. It never works. Like anybody who tries this ends up not just failing, but actually defeated and like beat up, bloody and bleeding in a corner somewhere. And so it feels very dangerous to me. It feels like a very dangerous time. I'm back in the US right now. I have some traveling to do here. I'm going to get to see a good portion of the Atlantic coast, and it feels really, really dicey. It feels really dicey to me. And so, on that note, let me just tell you what I did this past week,
Yeah.
because
So you're in El Salvador.
I was in Salvador. We flew down. There was a ton of good stuff, so I'm gonna share that first. But there was also something really bad and really dark and very sinister that happened while we were down there. And
Okay.
but the good part first, we had it's a meeting of investors and freedom lovers and innovators and capitalists and the kind of people you want to surround yourself with at this time. Um, it's a international group. I'm not going to say the name, like we'll get to that part at some point, but right, we're still forming this. So there was a lot of sort of behind the scenes kind of meetings and meetups and people with ideas and some people with capital, and there were businesses pitching ideas to investors. And so there was just a tremendous, tremendous meeting of the minds. These are people who share values, who really share a vision, a worldview, but also a vision of, okay, well, we're not going that way, right? We're not going to be tagged and fed bugs and use CBDCs,
Uh,
to buy our allotment of soy protein, right? So let's start figuring out how we can turn the ship and sort of or break off on our own, and make a good go of it. And so I'll just share with you a couple of the really interesting investment possibilities, because I think it speaks about other parts of the world that I'm into. There's the second largest gas field and the fourth largest oil deposit, I think I have that right, is in Argentina, of all places. Now, this is not unknown. This is not like somebody just stumbled upon this in the desert last week. It's called Vaca Muerta, which means dead cow, hilariously enough. But it's a high desert, high plain area of closer to Patagonia and the border with Chile, so close to the mountains, but there in the high plains.
it's a
And
beautiful, beautiful part of
massive,
the
yeah,
world.
massive, beautiful, very remote. And so the building out of the infrastructure for the workforce that needs to be there right now, they're driving something like 5 hours round trip to get to their jobs. And that's all unproductive time as far as the oil companies are concerned. But this thing is on, like it's being developed. It's definitely happening. This is a very exciting thing. Now, I talked to people while I was down there who have very strong opinions that Javier Milei is not what he appears to be, and he's actually a scumbag in sheep's clothing, as it were, and that may all be true. However, right, in the man's defense, right, and again, this comes back to the dilemma that we face in the United States. Which one do you want? You want like the dog shit burger over here, or do you want like to blow your brains out on this side? Like the terrible choices
We can't
politically.
let ideal be the enemy of not as bad
You
as it was.
you can't
And it's
let
very clear
perfect.
what he's doing is improving things to some
It's
degree.
undeniable. And also, the
Yeah.
important thing to realize about Millet, you can say anything you want, and you can even look and pick apart his policies, and maybe down the road, it's like, yeah, you see, I told you, dummy. But right now, what's happening, you can't stop, or you cannot change or overlook the fact that this man has educated entire generations about Austrian economics. He says straight out in ways that
Unapologetically.
everybody understands. You could be a 10-year-old and you would basically get like, oh, so when they print money, that's fake money and that causes prices to go up. I get it now. Like he's made it so clear to everybody that the government is the enemy. We are slashing government, and he has cut government. And so whether he's backed by Zionist banksters and all the rest, which apparently he is, nonetheless, right? Argentina is a very, very interesting location. I'm headed down there in a couple of weeks, so I'll report back after that trip as well at some point here. But that's a spot to watch for. Argentina, I think, is
Can
a place to really look for. Yeah.
can I chime in on that just to kind of maybe elaborate on what we were discussing earlier? If and I don't know if this is true or not, but if Malay is backed by the bankster faction, it kind of dovetails with what I was suggesting earlier that the banksters in the U.S. are like, look, we can't have full blown communism
Yeah.
because it destroys us.
Yeah.
And so, if that is true, I mean, it might be a symbol that there is this kind of global power struggle between the bankster class, so to speak, and the full blown communists, which is what I think they are, the globalist faction.
Yep.
And those of us with free market principles have problems with the banking class too. But with their system in place, we can at least have this conversation
Well, I think
about, hey,
also,
here's what we need to do to improve.
yeah, I mean, you're bringing up a good point. It's like, did governments just suddenly become corrupt in 2020? No, they've always
No,
been this way. Like what's
yeah,
going on today has always gone on, but there's a faction that is unapologetically and sort of nakedly, right, in violation of rule of law, um, is not even pretending. Like, look at the process by which this dopey Kamala Harris was anointed as the next commander
the
in chief. I mean, there's nothing
yeah of
democratic
the
about it.
Democratic Party
The
completely.
Democratic
Nobody's
Party,
ever voted for her. She has
nobody's
not
ever
received a single vote.
she never got a single delegate, right? She was out before Iowa 4 years ago. And so, the whole thing reeks of hypocrisy on a level that I think, will continue to attract attention, right? Negative attention. Be like, wait a second, these people are full of shit, And so,
Yeah,
and so the corruption that has always existed among elites who quite obviously and understandably in some ways because they're human really prefer to feather their own nests with their position and their power. I mean, that has never not been the case. But you take somebody like Malay, who, for whatever else comes out of his efforts, entire generations have woken up to the fact that, like, yeah, the people picking your pocket were the people that you were voting for. And so that you've stopped, that you figured that part out, that's progress. To me, that's progress. You
yeah,
can't
you can't
undo that.
unlearn that.
You can't
You can't
unlearn
unlearn
that.
it.
Yeah,
So even if they
millions and
get rid of
millions.
this guy and put
That's
another
right.
Peronius in,
Yeah.
then inflation shoots up, and then, well,
Yep.
he was right, wasn't he?
Yeah, right. So to me, that's real, and it's worth pointing out because I think that I ran into people too in El Salvador who are they're negative in a way that actually in their own minds justifies what my friend said, arguing in bad faith. And it's a bad
Yeah,
faith argument. It's like, well, you see, like he's bad because this. It's like, listen, this is a street fight. We're involved in a street fight. You don't get to have the philosophical discussion about the way things should be and in the right in a perfectly free society with no corruption, right, where no human beings were frail and had failings and all the rest, then this wouldn't happen. It's like, fair enough, right? But if it's this or the horrific outcome of, I mean, show me one time that the policies that are being forwarded by, sort of the elite communist faction, right, of both US politics and elsewhere, because it's just as bad and probably much worse in Europe. Show me any
yeah.
time ever that central control thing has ever worked and
Leads
resulted
to
in good
death and
decisions.
destruction
Yeah,
every
it
single
leads
time.
to death and destruction, and it's not just that it has 100% track record of unblemished by success. It's not just that; it's also the fact that it's very easy to see and understand cause and effect. It's very easy. You have to train yourself. If you're looking for ways to educate yourself on this, read. I have several good books for you this week, but just as we may have mentioned this before, but Hayek's work, Road to Serfdom, highly readable. Right? You don't have to be an economist to understand this. The man writes at a fairly easy to understand level. Henry Hazlitt, Economics in One Lesson. Hayek, again, The Fatal Conceit. That's a little more high level, but not much. But if you're into understanding sort of, but here's why governments lie about economics. Here's why they're lying about the monetary system. Here's why they lie about inflation. Here's why it's not hard to understand. What's hard is for people to tell the truth about it, because the only people qualified, meaning allowed, right, to actually discuss these matters are on the take, right? They're getting paid by deceiving you. And so Milei has undone that. That's a very positive thing. Our other favorite leader in the world today is, of course, Bukele. Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, if you're not familiar with the man, is a real beacon of, dare I say, moral kind of rectitude. If you go watch the interview he did with Tucker Carlson, there's that great section at the beginning, and he says, we actually realized we were up against something so dark and difficult, the gangs in El Salvador. Tattooed savages just running around, like killing and kidnapping and raping and murdering and extorting money, like just absolute mayhem throughout the country, year after year after year. He said, we got the cabinet together and we prayed. Gives me chills. We prayed for a solution. Tucker says, you prayed. Why did you do that? He said, why not? Why not? We didn't have an answer. We were looking for answers. And so they enlisted the military. Now, to us in normal times, right? When I was a kid, if you're part of a society and the government enlists the military to crack down on the civil society, that's a bad thing. That's a very dangerous thing. In normal times, that's not a good sign, because what's to stop those people? Even if say the president is a well-meaning kind of bloke, what's to stop those people from using the power of the state to do the same thing the gangs were doing, right? The answer is nothing, but we're not in normal times. We're not living in normal times. And if your entire society is overrun by guys with tattoos on their faces who sacrifice to Satan and have nothing to lose, right? And don't really feel like, like they'll kill you as quick as look at you. Calling in the troops was a very bold move. Now, this is the part that's actually very sad. And this is a very sinister message. The police chief, whose name was Mauricio Ariaza, if I'm saying it correctly, died. This is the captain of police who ran the effort to round up and subdue the gangs, and who essentially is responsible, right, to the degree that one man is responsible. This was Nayib's, Bukele's right-hand man. He ran this effort. He subdued the gangs. El Salvador is, as of today, the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. They have something like 2 homicides per 100,000 people. I can tell you from being in, perfectly acceptable areas where you could certainly rob and mug people and steal their stuff and all the rest. I didn't feel any danger at all, not one time. We drove to the hotel at 1 a.m. through these back roads and farming areas because the whole area is so agricultural. And I know what danger smells like. I've been through enough places in Latin America to know when you need to look out, right? You need to keep moving and watch who you make eye contact with and all the rest. There's no garbage on the streets. Like, the place is really, really on the way up. Now, it's still a very poor Latin American country. They got a long way to go. But even on the highway from the airport to the tourist area, we stayed at El Tunco in Libertad. The town is called Libertad. It's a surfing village right on the coast. Beautiful. Much too hot for me, thank you. But even driving in there, there's big cranes putting bridge abutments together. So they're building infrastructure. I went to the barber there and got a shave, and they're putting in sewage systems through the neighborhoods there, right? They have all the big cement equipment that's going to get put underground. The trench was already dug. So, I mean, there's tremendous, tremendous prosperity showing up. And that's, boy, in these poor Latin American countries where people have just been traumatized for decades, right? Because Guatemala was like this too. When I first showed up there, they just came out of civil war in 1996 when the peace accords were signed, and I got there in 99. So I'm familiar with the pattern. I've seen this play out before. I've seen this. And what's happening there is really tremendous. But the death of Ariaza, he went to the border with Honduras, so the story goes, to pick up some white-collar criminal who had embezzled $35 million. I don't know more about sort of who was behind that or what was all about. The helicopter took off again and it immediately crashed. Everybody on board was killed. Now, helicopter crashes, right, at opportune times are a theme. This is a pattern, right, at this stage. It happened in Iran to their president. Who knows what the actual cause of the accident was? Bukele immediately said, look, we're calling on the international community. We're treating this as something suspicious. We don't think this was an accident. We need to know what happened and why. But to me, this is a message. Bukele has created a little beacon of hope, and he speaks out about. He said we're going to trade with everybody. Like, we don't have any favorites. You want to do business with us? You're welcome to do business here. Now, the Chinese have invested a good deal of money into El Salvador. Like for them, it's a lot of money. $500 million or something is the number that I saw in my research. Maybe that's accurate. Maybe that's not exactly accurate, but big infrastructure projects are being funded by the Chinese. And the Chinese are all through Central America now, and they are making a difference in the lives of the people there. The kind of thing that the U.S. used to be known for, but many, many decades ago, when we were the beacon of hope and the light of the world, the Chinese have usurped that position. And the Chinese believe that they absolutely do know how to bring people out of poverty, and they have a lot of proof that in fact their system does work for that. And so these kinds of partnerships that are taking place, I mean, that's America. That's
I
the
want to
bottom
ask you
line.
when you're done. I want to ask
Please.
you a question about that.
Yep, yep. So I mean, that's my full statement. Like, this is a very dark message, I think, to Bukele. I'm not saying I know who's behind it. I'm not even speculating, right? But I don't think I don't think that helicopter crashes, right, with police chiefs. I don't think you pass over that lightly and just assume that that's just a weird coincidence. I doubt it, and I think Bukele knows that. And so my impression of the place, Joe, is. Um, it's really heartening. We talked to the cab drivers, we talked to the wait staff, we talked to the hotel staff, we talked to the people who are around us and that we saw every day there. We stayed, by the way, if you go stay at Acantilados or any of the areas around Acantilados, I'll put some video together for us for this and show some B-roll footage of where we were. It's just unbelievable. Like the surfing was great. Like the whole thing was a real experience. It's awesome. It's about 1,000 degrees, right? Even at midnight, like it's so hot there. It's the hottest country I've ever been to, right? I never sweated like I sweated in Salvador. So for that reason, right, I don't even know that I'd go back, but it is beautiful. And there's areas high up that are very pleasant. But my impression is what's happening there is very good. It's also very delicate. It's also a very precariously perched situation that could go either way. I think Bukele knows that he's probably right. He's certainly a target. He certainly has enemies. He's certainly made enemies, but he's made enemies of people who used to stand for freedom, who used to believe that bringing people out of poverty would be a good thing, right? That making the world a better place would be a good thing. And I don't believe that those people are running the institutions north of El Salvador, shall we say. And so he is a thorn in the side of the existing power structure. And that's something to know. That's something to think about. I mean, I try to provide color commentary on what it's like to have an international life and where you might consider doing that. And so my considered opinion on El Salvador, and look, if Bukele's gone tomorrow, and I hope he wins, I hope he survives, I hope he continues, and that his ideas also continue to outlive him, even if he lives a good full long life. Because he's obviously a very worthwhile individual and something really unique on the world's political stage. There's no doubt about it. He's the real deal, but it's dangerous. The situation is dangerous because things could really go off the rails in El Salvador. And while you know you don't necessarily want to bet you don't want to bet the bank, right, on El Salvador remaining. I think it's good right now. We met some business owners who are tremendously, tremendously successful and wealthy, and people who saw and predicted correctly that things were going to get really good in El Salvador. Guy bought, oceanfront property for about $100,000, and he's got villas and restaurants, and just an unbelievable setup. It's got to be worth it might be worth $10 million. Like I can't even imagine how much it's worth now. So good for him. Like these are people who really create things,
And
entrepreneurs.
it's not just for him too. This is something Mises talked about a lot. For any country that is economically undeveloped relative to the first world, so to speak, you need foreign investment. You need foreign capital to flow in to develop economic activity, whatever it is, whether it's hotels or whether it's restaurants or whether it's industry, whether it's the
To create
drilling for
wealth.
oil, because that creates jobs for the local economy, which then enables people to create, presuming that that they are free to create businesses without overly excessive taxation and regulation. Then it leads to small business growth and everything else. But the foreign investment of capital is really what drives it. At least drives it very, that's what accelerates everything. I mean,
That's
it
right.
it would take otherwise, who knows how many decades of perfect activity without foreign capital
Yep.
For a country even just to kind of get to a
That's
base
right.
level. So
And not
we
surprisingly,
talk about
Bukele
that a lot.
understands this. He's doing his very best to attract it. They've made something like 1,000 passports available to serious professionals. Passport in El Salvador right now costs you $1 million if you want to buy one legally, buy one. But they want people coming down. So if you're a doctor, you're an engineer, you're a system, computer systems guy, you can get to El Salvador, but you got to set up shop there and be there a certain time and all the rest. So they're serious. Like the guy gets it. He's not just sort of morally correct. He's also a businessman, right? He has a coffee brand, which I'm told is very good, and it's top dollar coffee. So good for him. Um, but the Salvador thing, I did not go see the real estate, but I can report on it, some other time. Um, you know, it's another place where you could plant a flag, and even if Bukele is gone tomorrow, the ideas that he's let loose and the prosperity that he's let loose would still have a fighting chance. Too many people have sort of seen the light. I mean, he is using the gang members that they rounded up to pay their debt to society by doing public works. I mean, it's exactly what you should do if you're in power. He's taken criminals and turned them into productive members of society. And those who want to reintegrate have the opportunity to do that once their debt is paid. And so he's done something so extraordinary, it's almost worth going just to see it, just to see what the turnaround actually looks like. And that's really what I was hoping to find there. But that's El Salvador. I have more to say about it, but maybe that's a good stopping point for Salvador.
Yeah, but one question I wanted to ask as you were talking there, you mentioned that the Chinese are kind of coming in and filling the
Yes.
role that the US used to. They're doing the same thing in Africa too, throughout Africa. My question to you, because I don't know a lot about this at all, when the US did it, right? Obviously there was some, they um, spearheaded growth and development and all these things, but they also kind of subjugated these countries to Western institutions like the IMF and the World Bank and all these things. And so
USAID.
they had to borrow money from the Western institutions and then pay them back. And then they were then exposed to interest rate policy and all these things. And so so it's almost like a colonization model in a financial
Using
sense is
debt.
what the
That's right.
West did. Yes.
Yeah.
Is China doing something similar, or
Of
what is
course.
their?
I mean,
Yeah.
look, obviously
Okay.
I'm not privy to the deals, but I'm sure, whatever is being done out of the goodness of understand this, the Chinese, because I have some familiarity with the culture because of my time in medicine. I mean, this was my area of expertise. I also have contacts. I know people who know people at really high levels in China as well. They believe, and but I think at some level earnestly believe, right? Some of the brass really believes, no, it's our turn in history, it's our turn in the spotlight, and the way that we're going to win over hearts and minds is to actually be valuable to people. So what a concept, right? The building of ports. Now, Western media obviously immediately spins this. And by the way, I'm not a fan of any government, right? I don't what I'm saying here is that in order for the Chinese to win, they actually have to do something valuable. And so that is what they're doing. They're not coming in. Will they? And is there an element of they're using the same? By the way, the best book for understanding sort of how the whole US debt game is played, right? When the US helps other countries, is that book by Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John
Yeah.
Perkins, I think it is.
Yep.
He does a good job because he was there. This was his task. This was his job. I mean, he's a bit of a holy Joe now because he kind of saw the error of his ways, and so now he's running around trying to make amends. And I think it's genuine. I think he genuinely figured out like, whoa, I'm playing for the wrong team here. Like it would be better if I could help people instead of doing, following orders. And the whole model is, as you said, right? You indent the nation through IMF loans, et cetera, et cetera. And that's it, right? The population, essentially, the politicians become strongmen to keep the people working so they can siphon off productive labor. And then, the money goes up, 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 up and gets sucked upward to these multinational, transnational kind of organizations like the IMF and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's
And
the
it
game.
creates an element of manipulation too, because they're
100%.
dealing with local currencies,
Yeah.
which then fluctuate against the US dollar. So,
Yeah.
so it creates a situation where they might have a certain debt service and the number's the same, but all of a sudden it's way harder to pay it. with just decisions that are made external to them by Western institutions.
Right,
That's without
right. So I
going
think
into
to
the
answer
rabbit.
your question, right, there is an element of like the Chinese gifted Costa Rica with a football stadium. The Chinese gifted El Salvador with a big library, which flies the Chinese flag over it in
Oh,
San Salvador.
yeah.
Other infrastructure projects. There's a big port. The Turks now have decided that they're all in. They're going to spend several $1 billion, $1.6 billion on a port, a deep water port that will help El Salvador become a hub for big time ocean going trade. I mean, this is a big deal. Like what's happening now is a big deal. Some part of that, and mostly for the Chinese right now, the string attached, just so everybody understands, like what's happening geopolitically, the string attached to that gift is you must recognize diplomatically that Taiwan is part of China. In other words, you do not have
So
separate
that
dealings.
is
Yeah,
it.
you do
Okay.
not have separate dealings where it's like, oh, Taiwan is Taiwan and China is China, and
Okay.
we reckon no, there is no such thing as Taiwan separate from China. That island belongs to us. It's part of China. You must sort of openly
And
embrace that and sort of,
Taiwan is,
vote
of course,
accordingly.
now a big technology hub, big semiconductor hub, and
It
so
is the
all of a sudden it's
semiconductor hub.
valuable. Whereas what 40 years ago it was a
Uh,
swamp, wasn't it?
yeah, Porter, our friend Porter has done some of the best work on what is the next revolution, the parallel processing revolution that is essentially being enabled by these tremendously small, unbelievably precise semiconductor chips. And almost all of the important chips, of course, are sourced and made out of a big foundry in Taiwan. So that's Taiwan's importance.
Okay, so that's the angle. China
Yes.
wants to make sure that they get kind of Taiwan
They are
back
playing
under
at
their.
yeah, they are
Okay.
playing chess at a level that again, as our society argues over pronouns and whether
Can men have
Kamala,
babies?
yeah, Kamala has the best policies and all the rest, and it's like nobody's
Well, we don't
talking.
even talk about policies because they
Yeah.
haven't released any. It's more, is she the candidate of joy?
Yes, yes,
And
yes. So
young and energetic,
the
the most
United States,
energy since Obama in 2008. I've
yeah.
seen all those things.
Yeah, no, the United States has become a very unserious place in the sense that, and I don't mean unserious, like I wish it was unserious in the sense that we could have a laugh, right? Because
Yeah, not care about what these
yeah,
idiots in politics do. But
yeah, even humor has become outlawed. I mean, the guys doing a Tonight Show, not that I watch this stuff anymore, but you catch a clip every now and then, Colbert, right? These guys are absolutely unfunny. But what they're now required to do is sort of trumpet the
propagandists.
propaganda. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're trumpeting propaganda, and we got to poke fun at Trump because this and this. And but the US is very unserious in another sense, which is there's really nobody anywhere at any level discussing important things that are unfolding around the world, like the potential for actual nuclear exchange, like the potential of a real dust up in the Middle East, because it's coming.
did
Like right the situation with Taiwan and China, and so I'm very bearish on what's taking place in the US. I don't see a way out of it, but I'm also very optimistic that on the other side that sort of reality will win out, right? The
reality. These
reality,
ideas are spreading,
yeah,
and
the I
people are seeing. And once you see, you can't unsee.
once you see what's taking
Not
place,
everybody has eyes to see. I think that's a kind of a biblical thing. You have eyes and you can't see. You have ears, you can't hear.
there's a lot
Something
of
like that.
biblical stuff going on, isn't
Yeah.
there? Yes.
I read something today though. It really made me very concerned. I mean, more so than I already was, and that is something to the effect that they tasked the Army Corps of Engineers with researching how agriculture chains or farms would be impacted by nuclear war. And so I think it
Yeah.
was a DoD contract or something like that, where they're actually. And what does that mean? It doesn't just mean they said, "Oh gosh, we should look into this." It means that there's a lot more going on underneath the hood.
Yeah, my feeling is
And
if somebody sets off a nuclear device, it's over. Because if one goes off, more than one is going to go off, and the Earth simply cannot recover from that, or human beings can't recover. The Earth will probably recover in time, but human civilization comes to an end. And so this flippant kind of dialogue about, well, if the Russians want to fight, well, we'll just use nukes or whatever, like this kind of attitude that all of that is okay is obviously it's the most troubling thing we've ever seen in our lifetime. And meanwhile, it just seems like everybody just keeps scrolling away on TikTok and there's no
Through their
actual
Facebook
debate.
feed.
Yeah, I mean, that's not true. I mean, the only serious voice that I've heard all this time is Kennedy, who's kind of tried to make an effort to say, look, enough. Like this has to stop. Like it's going to get too far. We're in real danger here. And then right next to that will be some counter argument in an article about like, well, Putin's bluffing. And he hasn't nuked us yet, so we'll just keep shooting missiles in there. And so this is unbelievably dangerous time. It's why I'm such a fan of internationalizing. Quite frankly, if nukes start going off, you might as well be at ground zero. It's better to get it over with because it's not going to be a pleasant experience. But short of the end of human civilization, there's a whole world out there away from this trouble. I'm off to where am I going? I'm in the US now. I'm off to I got to go to Panama briefly next month and then Argentina after that. So we're going to see a ton more of the Americas. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, you can check out my work. I have a group community that I talk to every couple of weeks. It's called the X Plan community. The whole idea with the X Plan is like your plan B needs to include things that are really unique to you. And so why not have a group where you can really tailor your education and go do some of these things yourself? Setting up a plan B is not difficult. You don't need to pay 50 grand to somebody else to create your plan B. It's actually very fun. And especially if you have answers or know where you can get them, you create your own plan B, right? The whole idea is that you paddle your own canoe at times like this in history, but that you should do it in the company of and sort of in convoy with other people who share your values. And that's what I've tried to create there. That link is below this video as well.
Yeah, really, really great program. I had the privilege of coming on and meeting some of the folks. It's probably been a month or so ago now,
Yep.
maybe two, but
We're going to bring you on
really,
board.
really high quality
We'll
people.
have that
Yeah,
talk after this. Yeah, but I know you
yeah.
have something also that you offer for folks. So if you want to just plug that quickly, we should probably wrap up. I'm getting kicked out of the of my studio here.
Yeah, well, I run an investment membership called the Phoenician League, and our goal is to help folks first build financial freedom, first financial security, true financial security, and then we work towards financial freedom, and that involves creating extra sources of income, the types of investments that will build passive income for you. And so, the Phoenician League is a full blown investment membership, and we have a shorter course called Finance for Freedom, which
It's
is just
excellent.
kind of communicates the
Both of
basics.
them are
So
really excellent. Yep, really, really excellent. You're doing God's work, my friend. Heaven knows we need to protect our money through this. So protect your family, protect your physical being, but also protect your money. You're not gonna do well without either of those. So that's it for this week. Unfortunately I have more to say, but I don't know that we have time. I'm gonna have to cut it off because I'm being called for dinner. So
all right. Well, we'll pick it up there next week.
awesome. Joe, good talking to you as always.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right, buddy. See you guys. Thanks.
See ya.
Yep.